Marcação, documentado, consenso, achado real, leitura, especulação sinalizada. Every empire leaves a record. Some records were never meant to be found. This is Fiel No 009. In August of 1590, a man stood on the shore of an island off the coast of what is now North Carolina, looking at the place where he had left 115 people 3 years earlier. His daughter, his granddaughter, a whole colony. The houses were gone, not burned, dismantled. The settlement was empty, and carved into a post of the palisade was a single word: Croatoan. For 400 years, that word has been sold to you as a mystery with no answer. Tonight we open the ledger, because the evidence has been pointing at an answer the whole time, and it is far quieter and far more human than the legend wants it to be. Here is what I want you to hold on to. The word on that post was not a scream, it was an address, and the reason no one went to that address for centuries has almost nothing to do with the colonists, and everything to do with a war being fought 3,000 miles away. Let's build the case from the ground up. In 1587, Queen Elizabeth's England was trying, for the third time, to plant a permanent colony in North America, the venture financed under Sir Walter Raleigh's patent. Roughly 115 colonists, men, women, and children, landed under a governor named John White. White was not a soldier, he was an artist. His watercolors of the coast and of the Algonquian towns are, to this day, some of the finest visual records we have of native life in that era. They were meant to settle further north on the Chesapeake. They didn't get there. The expedition's pilot left them at Roanoke Island instead, the site of an earlier, failed English fort. And on the 18th of August, 1587, White's granddaughter was born there, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. The colony was already in trouble. Relations with the local Algonquian communities had been poisoned by the previous English expedition, which had burned a native village over a stolen silver cup. Supplies were thin, so White did what a governor does. He sailed back to England to fetch more. He expected to be gone a few months. He was gone 3 years, and this is the single most important fact in the entire case, the one the ghost stories always skip. The moment John White reached England, the country went to war footing. This was the height of the Anglo-Spanish War. In 1588, Philip II of Spain launched the Armada, the largest invasion fleet Europe had ever seen, against England. The Crown seized every seaworthy ship for national defense. A private resupply run to a colony across the Atlantic was, quite simply, not permitted to sail. White tried. Twice his small vessels put to sea. Once they were beaten back, once they were plundered by privateers and limped home. It was not until August 1590, 3 years late, that John White finally set foot on Roanoke again. So when we ask, why did no one help them? The answer is not supernatural. The answer is the Spanish Armada. Now, the evidence on the ground, and I want to read it the way an investigator reads a room. White recorded what he found in his own hand, a narrative later published in Richard Hakluyt's Principal Navigations. The palisade was standing. The houses had been taken apart, their materials removed. On one of the main posts, at eye level, letters had been carved. Croatoan. On a nearby tree, 3 letters, CRO. Here is the detail that cracks the case open. Before White left in 1587, he had given the colonists a signal. If they moved, they were to carve the name of their destination, and if they left in distress, under attack, forced out, they were to carve a cross above it. There was no cross. White himself wrote that he was, in his words, greatly joyed to find the mark, because to him it meant they had gone, deliberately and safely, to Croatoan. Croatoan was a real place, the island we now call Hatteras, and it was home to the one native community that had stayed friendly to the English. The people of Manteo, an Algonquian man who had sailed to England and back and was the colony's closest ally. The word on the post was a forwarding address, and the people who left it were telling him, "We went to our friends, so let's take the popular theories and test them against that room, one at a time." Theory 1, they were massacred. Decades later, colonists at Jamestown reported that the paramount chief Powhatan had claimed to have killed English settlers. It's repeated as fact, but look at the scene. A massacre leaves bodies. It leaves graves, ash, broken defenses, the distress cross they had agreed on. White found none of it. He found a tidy site, a palisade intact, houses carefully disassembled, and a calm, crossless sign pointing where to follow. Second-hand hearsay recorded years later, with no physical evidence and no bodies, is not a case. It's a rumor. We set it aside. Theory 2, disease or starvation wiped them out. Same problem, sharper. If 100 people died of hunger or plague on that island, the island keeps them. There is a settlement's worth of graves that should exist, and 4 centuries of searching has never produced a mass grave at Roanoke. People who starve to death do not stop to disassemble their own houses and carry the timber away. That is the behavior of people relocating, packing up, not people dying. Set aside. Theory 3, the Spanish destroyed them. Spain absolutely wanted the colony gone, and Spanish ships did go looking for it. But the record shows they never found the 1587 settlement. They located only the earlier, already abandoned English fort. No Spanish account claims the colonists, no wreckage of a raid. Motive without evidence is not a verdict. Set aside. And Theory 4, the one the internet loves, that they vanished into thin air. They did not. 115 people do not evaporate, they walk somewhere. The so-called Dare Stones, a series of inscribed rocks that surfaced in the 20th century, supposedly written by Eleanor Dare, are regarded by historians as, at best, deeply unreliable, and at worst, outright forgeries. There is no mystery force here. There is only a question we were too distracted to answer. Where did the road from that post actually lead? And in the last 2 decades, the ground has started to answer, in 2 directions at once. Follow the post's own instruction, south to Hatteras Island, the historic Croatoan homeland. There, archaeologists working with the University of Bristol's Mark Horton and the Croatoan Archaeological Society have excavated a native town site and pulled up something striking. Late 16th century English objects woven into the native layers. Part of a rapier, a slate writing tablet and a lead pencil. Gun hardware, a bale seal, not a pile of trade trinkets on the surface, European material embedded in the daily life of an Algonquian community, exactly where the sign said to look. Now look the other direction, inland west to the mainland, near the head of Albemarle Sound, in what is now Bertie County. A team from the First Colony Foundation re-examined one of John White's own maps and found that a patch of paper had been glued over it, hiding the symbol of a fort. They dug at that spot. They call it Site X, and they found it too, distinctive late Tudor English pottery, borderware and its kin, of exactly the right date, in a place no later colonist had reason to be. Put the 2 together, and the impossible disappearance dissolves into something ordinary and true to how frontier colonies actually failed. The colonists did not vanish. They ran out of time, ran low on supplies, and did the only rational thing. They broke into smaller groups and folded themselves into the native communities that could feed and shelter them. Some, it seems, went south to Croatoan, to Mantio's people, as the Post declared. Others may have gone inland toward the mainland Algonquian towns near Site X. And this is not exotic. For generations afterward, English and later colonists reported native communities along the Carolina Sounds with grey eyes, lighter hair, English words, and stories of ancestors who could read from a book. Anecdotes, yes, but anecdotes that point the same way the archaeology does. I want to be precise because rigor is the whole point of this archive. English artifacts alone are not a signed confession. Trade goods travel. No single object yet proves a named colonist lived and died at either site. But the convergence, a crossless sign naming a real, friendly place, a tidy, corpse-free abandonment, period English material surfacing in native ground both south and west, and a rescue delayed 3 years by a war, all of it leans one way. The mystery of Roanoke was never what happened to them. The mystery was that we kept looking for a monster when the post had already given us an address, and a war had kept us from reading it for 400 years. The record remains. Draw your own conclusions. This was File No. 009. The archive stays open. Next, in the Vanishing, a whole army marches into the desert to erase an oracle, and 50,000 men are never seen again. The lost army of Cambyses. The ledger is already open.